Good evening and Happy New Year from the Film in Focus team. Welcome along. So for the final time, me and Ray Turner are here to complete our top 50 countdown of our favourite sci-fi movies. Ray, how's it going?
Hello, Happy New Year. It's
Happy New
going
Year.
good.
Good to have you.
This year's been good so
Thanks
far.
for coming. Yeah, so far so good. 2 days in.
Yeah.
So we're into the top 10 now, and as always, your correspondents are welcome. But without any further ado, we'll kick off with you, Ray. What is your number 10?
My number 10 is Little Shop of Horrors.
Okay.
Frank Oz from 1986. So it was a
Right.
remake of a 1960 Roger Corman film. It's Steve Martin, Rick Moranis, Ellen Greene, Vincent Gardenia. And yeah, I mean, it's just very funny and charming and great music. And it's a musical, in case anyone hasn't seen it. It's about a guy who, Seymour is an orphan working in a flower shop. And he's secretly in love with his co-worker, Audrey, who is dating a psychopath, or a sociopath, maybe.
Yeah.
And Seymour discovers a plant which feeds on human blood, and which then starts to speak and demands that Seymour kills people so that he can feed them to it. And it's quite black, but it doesn't come across as black humour really. It's just kind of funny. It's got some absolutely fantastic moments. The funniest bit, I think, I don't want to give away what it is, but when Steve Martin reveals what his profession is one of the funniest bits of the film, I think. And I saw it on stage. I saw the stage play.
Right.
Which I saw it in the West End. I don't know. I was trying to Google it and I couldn't figure out if it had Ellen Greene in it, who I didn't know who she was at the time. But she then went on to do the film. But the stage play had a different ending, and so when I saw the film, I thought that was kind of its weak point. Really, was that the ending wasn't as good as the one in the stage play. But they actually did film the original ending, and they tried it out with audiences, and the audiences hated it. So they filmed a different ending. So yes, it's sort of test screening, horrible thing. One little thing, I haven't checked this, but the 1960 film, the Roger Corman film, I think it's one of the earliest film appearances by Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson's definitely in it.
That's
it may be his first film appearance, I'm not sure. It's a very small part.
Someone can check that for us.
But yeah, I didn't think to check that.
I know it's definitely one of his early appearances. So
yeah, and the music by Alan Menken and Howard Ashman, and they wrote the songs for Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast as well for Disney.
Right.
But this was before that, and not shackled by Disney. They wrote something quite dark and
there's some good, really black sort of humour in there. Steve Martin's entertaining, very scary. It's a twisted role for him. He's pretty good, damn good.
And Frank Oz is very good at directing comedy, I think.
I think the casting was pretty much spot on.
Yeah.
Rick Moranis.
Yeah, he's
really
brilliant in it. And
so
Ellen Greene
likeable.
really kind of steals the film.
Yeah, she's great, isn't she?
And I don't know much about. Do you know what she's been in since? Or
no, I couldn't.
I think she's like a Broadway actress.
Right.
She played the part on Broadway, and they were trying to cast somebody else. And eventually, they kind of came around and said, "Well, she was brilliant. Why don't we just cast her?" And she was brilliant, So
yeah, it just works. It's really fantastic. So, Little Shop of Horrors, the remake, the musical version, Ray's number 10. So there's a little bit of surprise, and maybe for me as well at number 10. I think, because really my top 10, maybe not too many surprises, but I think this might be for some. I've gone with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind from 2004. So this has a sort of almost a Philip K. Dick sort of psychological premise to it, this really playful, surreal edge. The concept is really great and unique. They really dive into it effectively, really sort of gets their sort of like hands into it and really full on. Obviously, the main setup is then, there is like this technology where you can have like the memory of a relationship erased, and that's kind of the premise where at the beginning not Bill Murray, I'm thinking of him because it's very deadpan, Jim Carrey is this very downtrodden figure who's sort of miserable and lonely, and then as the film goes on, we find out elements of his relationship with Clementine, played by Kate Winslet, and you get this back and forth sort of structure, and it really explores this like great concept and really beautifully, and it does make you think, well, would this be something you would do? And it really plays with it a lot. I think it asks many great questions. I think one of the things to say is that it might be Jim Carrey's best ever performance. He's really physical, he really transforms himself, he's very believable as this downtrodden sort of everyman. Kate Winslet is just a bundle of energy and unpredictable, very complex girl next door character. I think one of the clever things about her is the touch of her hair, you know, having a different colour hair, almost depending on the mood or, you know, the scene. So her mood or the scene sort of thing. So it's like one of those films where the attention to details and the metaphors really stand out. Really good supporting cast. Tom Wilkinson as good as always. Kirsten Dunst, Mark Ruffalo, Elijah Wood, Jane Addams, very underrated. And it's a film which celebrates like the endless possibilities of cinema and storytelling for me. It's beautifully sort of melancholic. Depending on your state of mind and how you read the film, I think it's either very romantic or very, you know, more bleak sort of thing. But I think that
it's kind of both, isn't it, really?
It is, but I think depending on your point of view, you could read it as one or the other. And importantly, like most great sci-fi, it's about the human condition. Stunning music, rich imagery. I love the use of weather conditions, the contrast, like on the beach scenes and then in the snow.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I loved the way it
film.
looked. Actually, that's the thing. I really remember. I don't really remember this. I remember the story, but I don't really remember the details of the story. If you know what I mean. So I just remember it's got this kind of slightly sort of dour, slightly underexposed kind of look. Not exactly underexposed.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's all a bit. It all looks like it's shot on overcast days.
Yeah, a lot of it is quite photogenic.
And I loved that about it. I thought it was quite beautiful, really. Just very somber sort of mood to the photography, which didn't always fit. Didn't always match, I should say, what was going on in the film. But I just had a beautiful mood.
But that's
to
maybe interesting in itself. Yeah. Okay, so that's my number 10, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
So my number 9 is Monsters from 2010. It's Gareth Edwards, starring Scoot McNairy and Whitney Able. And you haven't seen this, have you?
I haven't.
Yeah, this is this is an absolute gem of a movie.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
a lot of people say this.
Yeah, it's really, really good. And it's basically a sort of monster movie, but it's not like any kind of monster movie you've ever seen. It's absolutely not what I was expecting. Just a couple get stranded in Mexico. I think it's Mexico, and they have to get across this area that's infected by these aliens. So what the director said, he had the idea to make a monster movie set years after most other monster movies end, when people aren't running around and screaming, but life is going on, and where a giant dead sea monster is considered completely normal. So he made this on an absolute shoestring budget, less than $500,000. Didn't use a script. I think it was him doing the camera, a sound guy, and the two actors, and they just went around South America. All the other actors were amateur, and the two leads were, in fact, a real-life couple, which he cast a real-life couple because he didn't want to have to worry about, spend time kind of getting to work on their relationship. He just wanted people that had a natural chemistry. And yeah, I mean, it is just an amazing gem of a film. It's my favourite film of the 21st century. We did that list, and that was my number one film. It's my number 9. Number 9. I've got into Beatles mode now. It's my number 9 film of science fiction film.
Very good. So
and I kind of saw it a bit as a metaphor for the war on terror, and I think you can read, obviously you can read these films in all sorts of ways, but it's like these monsters that they're talking about all the way through the film actually don't attack until they are attacked. And actually the sort of point is, when they leave them alone, they're actually quite okay. They just kind of seem to be kind of travelling along kind of okay, and it's when they actually kind of provoke them. And I suppose, when I saw it, the whole war was kind of, I suppose it was still kind of going, more than it is. And I just sort of felt like kind of, I think there's maybe he's trying to make this kind of point that actually don't provoke people and then be surprised, I mean, I don't know, it's probably not what he was after at all, but yeah, I mean, and of course he then went on to direct a remake of Godzilla and
He did, yeah.
and Star Wars Rogue One, and he hasn't done anything else since, as far as I know.
No. But maybe those sorts of films, they take up a lot of time, I guess.
But once they're finished, maybe he's doing another.
Possibly. I mean, he might not just be...
But for my money, I mean, Star Wars,
Takes
I haven't seen Godzilla, but Rogue One wasn't as good as Monsters.
No, possibly not. Okay, your number 9, my number 9. My number 9 is the first of this top 10, which is a rare example of a remake being better than its original. And that is The Fly, Cronenberg's The Fly from 1986. So anyone who knows me knows I'm a big Cronenberg fan. This is classic Cronenbergian body horror, but with a tragic romantic twist. And I think that's one of the things that hooks me, is the tragic romantic sort of element to it. Takes the basic monster movie premise of the original, but does something more radical and ambitious with it. It redefined Jeff Goldblum, I think, as the oddball nerd, but with that little bit of like sex appeal and danger. I think there's a good chance he might not be cast in Jurassic Park if it wasn't for this film, and
really?
Just how striking he is in this film.
What had he done before?
I mean, he was in that Invasions of the Body Snatchers, wasn't he? In that, but I think he was relatively unknown.
Was he in what was that one with Kevin Costner as a dead body? The Big Chill. Was he in that? I've got a feeling.
Oh, he might have been.
And yeah, I don't know.
But I think this was definitely his breakout part.
Yeah. And Gina Davis as well.
She's incredible. I was about to mention her. They have a real spark, and she
they were married,
brings
weren't
a
they?
lot of him. I don't know.
They were in real life.
Were they married?
I think they're not anymore,
Okay.
but they were.
No, they're definitely not anymore. But yeah. Oh wow, there you have it. That makes sense then. But yeah, really great chemistry. So I think if you're not rooting for him necessarily, I think she really pulls you in and makes you root for the relationship and the situation. And I think it just about gets the right balance between hammy, science fiction type dialogue. So there's actually a scene where the Gina Davis character says, be afraid, be very afraid. And you'd think that might fall apart, might fall flat, but just the way she delivers it, she just grounds it enough to make it work.
That was the tagline on the poster.
Yeah, it was, yeah. Really great practical effects, really impressive, visual, pulpy, and a likeable sci-fi. I think it is that tragic romance and the end of the film that really makes it work. The Fly from 1986. Your next
Okay,
one.
my number 8 is Planet of the Apes by Franklin Schaffner from 1968. So Charlton Heston, Roddy McDowall, Kim Hunter, Linda Harrison. Yeah, I mean, just what to say about Planet of the Apes? It's just a stone cold classic, isn't it? So it's based on a novel by Pierre Boulle. Is that Boulle or Boulle? I'm not sure. And he also wrote Bridge on the River Kwai.
Okay.
And the script was originally written by Rod Serling, who wrote
the Twilight
Zone.
Zone.
But it was rewritten by Michael Wilson, and who also wrote the script for Bridge on the River Kwai.
Yeah.
But they had to do it under a pseudonym, I think, because he was blacklisted.
Right.
By the McCarthy thing. So I mean, I don't know what to say about it. It's just classic, isn't it? So you've got this astronauts land on a planet that is inhabited by talking apes, where there are mute humans, and the apes discover that one of the astronauts can talk. This is Charlton Heston playing Taylor, and some of them decide to help him escape because basically he's put into a zoo and he's kind of going to be lobotomized and things like that. And it leads to this very, very, very classic, very famous ending, which was written by Rod Serling. And it has one of the most famous closing lines of all time, doesn't it? I think, which I'm trying not to give away. I mean, if there's anybody out there who hasn't seen it,
they haven't seen it.
But I think the thing for me was when I saw it as a kid, and there's a whole series of them. There were 5, I think, originally, and then of course they've made another 3 recently. Relatively recently, which are also really good. I mean, but I think what was really interesting was that the story started at one point, and then the first 2 films were kind of linear, and then they went back in time, and the apes go back in time and sort of in a sense, they're going back in time kind of causes these apes to become super intelligent because their genes get mixed in with other apes and things like that. And then you sort of see the events that lead to the apes taking over from the humans and stuff like that in the subsequent film. So I know this is not the same film, but that really fascinated me. The idea that that a story is kind of told backwards almost. So you're not seeing it from, you're not seeing, which obviously with the new ones, they've done that. They've started at point zero and worked their way through. Whereas with this one, they started at sort of more or less at the end and worked their way kind of back to the beginning and sort of, I suppose a bit like the prequels, the Star Wars prequels. But I mean, and also, the idea that of just time travel and that something that happens in the future comes back into the present and affects the very thing that has allowed it to happen in the future, if you see what I mean. So the apes coming back has allowed the apes to evolve to a point where they can travel in time to come back in time.
Okay.
And I kind of just thought it was fascinating, even though it's almost certainly complete nonsense. It just was absolutely fascinating, I thought.
There you go. Planet of the Apes,
Planet of the
original. That's your number 8.
Yeah.
My number 8, I'm staying in the 80s, and it's the other film which I think is better than the original. That is John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982. Classic Carpenter bottle movie, one of his best movies. Basic premise, which has been used countless times since. It pops up, a similar premise pops up in one of my favourite episodes of The X-Files, Ice, from season 1. Kurt Russell and that kick-ass flamethrower, just awesome to look at. A whole bunch of fine character actors. It's all about their interactions and the tension slowly being like ratcheted up. It's really moody and atmospheric. The setting is really effective. Benefits from being very low budget, of course. And another great example of wonderful practical effects. That's what we had in the 80s, and all the better for it. And like, pretty much every great Carpenter film, the music is like a character itself. I mean, that main theme is absolutely terrifying. It holds up very, very well. So The Thing from 1982 is my number 8.
Okay. Well, I saw that years and years ago, and I didn't like it. I saw it with a friend, and we chatted all the way through it. And so many people have said it's a must be. I've actually bought the DVD, and I was really hoping I'd get a chance to watch it before, but I haven't. But I suspect I'm going to discover that actually I really missed a bit of a treat back then, because I haven't heard anybody say a bad thing about it.
Well, it did grow on me, because I was probably similar the first time around, where it left me a little bit.
Right. But I didn't really watch it. That's the point. And so I was watching it, and I was going, it's just all special effects. It's not. There's no.
But it's practical effects. That's the point.
Yes, but everything was practical effects back then, wasn't it?
No, I know, but then that's how it works.
Yeah.
No, but it's good practical.
Well, yeah, I see your point. But what I mean was, I was like thinking, there's no story, there's no. But actually, sort of people said, "Oh no, what you wouldn't have got is the kind of creeping sense of dread." That is, and of course, I didn't get that at all. So I didn't give it a fair shot, and I'm going to at some point. But it has, and I was hoping I would have done it. But anyway, so my number 7. Should I do my number 7?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, well, it's Brazil by Terry Gilliam, 1985. So back in the 80s again. So Jonathan Pryce, Ian Holm, Robert De Niro, Catherine Hellman, Kim Bryce. Have you had this one?
I did. I have it earlier in the years.
This is actually his third film. It's the third film he made as a director. But it kind of feels like this is the first time he really got the kind of proper Terry Gilliam sort of thing, that it is, that we all kind of want when we see Terry Gilliam film. And it's kind of a cross between 1984 and Blade Runner. But actually, it's more of a sort of an attack on bureaucracy, really. It's just this kind of... It's a film that just hates bureaucracy. And the basic plot, I mean, in the very simplest way, is that a fly falls into a typewriter and it causes a misprint on some paperwork. And because of this one misprint, this fly, all these people's lives spiral out of control in the most ludicrous, kind of insane sort of way. And it's just this crazy film. But, I mean, it's also kind of a film that just looks fantastic. And... So, and what he wanted to do, what he said he wanted to do was he wanted to make a film set in the future, and he wanted to make the future look how a 1940s film director would have thought the future might look. So it's got this kind of very retro look about it. and everything's kind of very kind of slimline and sort of a bit 1950s looking. It's kind of got that kind of side of it. And just some interesting things about it. You know, he said that in one point they mention a 27B/6 form, which is one of the forms that Robert De Niro is supposed to have filled in before he can fix the plumbing. Because Robert De Niro is a kind of anarchic sort of a guerrilla plumber, isn't he, or electrician or something, isn't he? He goes around fixing people's plumbing without doing paperwork, you know, and that was a reference to the house where George Orwell wrote when he wrote 1984, which was 27B Canonbury Square, up 6 flights of steps. So that's the 27B/6. And yeah, he said it was part of a trilogy that started with Time Bandits and finished with The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which was his follow-up film. Yeah, which was a bit disappointing.
I've never seen it.
It was not very good. And he said it was all about the craziness of our awkwardly ordered society and the desire to escape it through whatever means possible. Okay. So there you are. And in this film, he started using an incredibly wide-angle lens, and I actually wrote down the number of the lens and whatever millimeter lens it was, and now I can't find it. But he uses it on he uses this particular lens so much, not just in that film. Since he's used it on every film, and it's now dubbed, apparently in the industry, it's now dubbed the Gilliam lens. Okay. So people say, I want a Gilliam lens on this shot. So yeah,
brilliant.
So that's Brazil from 1980.
Brazil. So I'll do my number 7, and then we'll take a quick break. So my number 7, we're back to Cronenberg, predictable for me. Videodrome from 1983, another one of his cult classics. Very surreal, very creepy, with sort of eye-popping like visual moments. Also this potent sort of satire where he basically predicted the internet. James Woods has probably never been better, or it's certainly one of his best performances. He nicely builds it over the course of the film. Debbie Harry is perfectly cast in one of her early Scream roles, and it's designed beautifully and is full of suspense and twists. Its most powerful weapon, I think, is turning the focus on the viewer and leaving them to think about the world outside of them. The ending pays off brilliantly as well, perfectly. It really stands up. It really shocks you into thinking about the themes of the movie, like consumerism and technology and sort of corrupt governments and so forth. Really impressive cult film, one of my favourite Cronenberg films, Videodrome from 1983. So it's your number 6, Ray.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, I think the next 6 films that I've got are not just my favourite science, but these are probably in my top 10 films of all time, or maybe not top 10, but top 20 of all time. So my number 6, and I've mentioned this a few weeks ago, was Back to the Future, Robert Zemeckis from 1985. Yeah. So Michael J. Fox, Crispin Glover, Leah Thompson, and Christopher Lloyd. Yeah. We all know the story. Kid goes back in time and prevents his parents from meeting. Yeah. And then has to try and engineer it so that they can get together again, so that he can be born. So I guess it's actually similar in the sense to that Planet of the Apes thing. Yeah. But you know, it's just one of the best Hollywood films, I think, from the 1980s, isn't it? It's kind of absolutely. Just, you know, certainly of that kind of that type of, you know, family fun blockbuster type films. It's just lasted way longer than I think those films are meant to. It's got longevity. It's got real
because it has a heart. And it's so well
and
written.
I mean, what were we saying last time? Because it was my TV movie of the week a few weeks ago, wasn't it? And I just said it's so perfectly plotted. It's kind of it's you know, there's nothing gets wasted. Everything pays off. Yeah. And I think that something that isn't mentioned enough with this film and other films by Robert Zemeckis actually is just what a good visual director he is. You know how good he is with visuals. And I kind of describe himself as elegant. Really, I think he choreographs actors and the cameras perfectly in a way that, you know, most directors are kind of, they'll choreograph the acting and then they'll shoot it in wide, mids, closes, and they'll do a couple of tracking shots here and there. But he really kind of, you know, he has shots developing from wides into close-ups and back again, and all in one shot. And, you know, the camera will pan around and all sorts of stuff happens. And that's just something he just does really. Him and Spielberg does it too, but I actually think Zemeckis does it slightly better. Yeah. And it's the sort of thing that George Lucas never does, kind of, which drives me mad when I watch George Lucas films. It's like kind of because, and yeah, I just think that's something that just isn't mentioned enough about him, and it's less so in some of his later films. Flight was it, and he did one with Brad Pitt recently, which I haven't actually seen, and what lies beneath it. I thought they weren't very good, but Flight was all right.
Flight was all right.
But this and Forrest Gump. I know a lot of people hate Forrest Gump, but I love the way Forrest Gump was shot, and I love the way Back to the Future is shot as a film. I just think he's got a real visual sense that's very, very strong.
No question. They go Back to the Future, and that's a nice.
That's just the first one, not the other.
Nice little tee. I know. Nice little tee up because you mentioned Spielberg. So Spielberg at his peak, Jurassic Park is my number 6. Ooh, so really? Gone a bit mainstream, but. Yeah, I think it's between this and Jaws for his best, actually, overall. And I think they tap into a similar thing where they're very successful as mainstream films. They're very engaging, they've got plenty of heart. But at the same time, there's just that little touch that tips each one over into having this sense of danger, this sense of thrill, this sense of, obviously, quite scary, With Jaws, he made it very atmospheric and scary when it needed to be. There are dark moments in there, and it's similar with this. It's sort of the definition of dinosaurs on screen, and he invites you into this world, this fascinating, mysterious world. But he does make it scary when it needs to be. There's some well-judged, jump scares. The breath on the thing from the dinosaur at one point is a very, really scary moment. So the horror moments work very well. It's like a classic sort of theme park ride with lots of ups and downs, but at times it does whip you out of your comfort zone. Great characters, fun jokes, perfectly crafted story. It's really nicely paid off. I really like the kids in it. Actually, you really believe them as like a brother and sister.
I think the boy was going to be cast in AI originally, was it? I think they were considering him.
Okay. Yeah, possibly. Yeah, he's very good in this. Sam Neill is great playing both parts. He has a nice little arc as the Grinch at the start and gradually becomes this cuddly sort of father figure. Jeff Goldblum, I mentioned before. Laura Dern never puts a foot wrong, one of my favourite actresses. As I said, proper kids. The creature design is fantastic. John Williams comes up with another beautiful score, maybe one of his bests. Probably a rare film where I probably wouldn't change a detail of it. It ticks all the boxes for a great family classic.
I mean, I certainly liked
Jurassic Park.
I wouldn't put it.
No, you have it.
I have. I mean, I think Spielberg's done much better films. But I do really like it.
It might partly be how vivid it was for me going to see it as a kid. I think that might be part of it.
I remember bunking off university to go and see it, actually. Nice. I was supposed to be editing a film, and I bunked off and went to watch Jurassic Park.
Nice. Okay.
in the Empire Leicester Square, no less.
Nice. So we're into the top 5.
Top 5. Well, my number 5 is the Andrei Tarkovsky 1972 Solaris.
Okay. Very good.
I'm going to try and read a bunch of Russian names now. Donatas Banianosis, Nikolai Grinko, and Anatoly Solzhenitsyn. Beautifully rolled off the tongue there, like a native, wasn't it? I'm sure. So I mean, this is probably one of his more accessible most accessible film, actually. I think. I mean, I just want to say about it. I mean, it's a scientist goes to a planet because these people are exploring it and they're losing communication with them. And when he gets there, he discovers that there's these strange creatures on the station that's circling the planet. And he starts getting visited by certain things, and he realizes that when people dream, their dreams become reality because of this planet that is called Solaris. And there's some other stuff, but I mean the thing about all of Tarkovsky's films is you don't really watch them, I think, for the story. There's something else, and I'm not sure I can really put my finger on what it is, because the film is full of allegory, I'm sure, and it's full of beauty and it's full of meaning. But in all honesty, I think you just kind of watch it and let it wash over you, and it's kind of actually quite an emotional experience. It's kind of like reading abstract poetry or something where you kind of go, I don't know why I'm responding to this, but I am. And it's kind of like that, and I'm probably not selling it. And obviously they did remake it in Hollywood with George Clooney. And it was great.
Which isn't, it's pretty good, actually.
It's not a bad film at all.
Yeah.
But again, it still didn't make a great deal. It sort of did make more sense. I mean, it was. I mean, I'm not saying it's not hard to follow the story. It's just the story itself isn't really why you're watching it. Yeah. It's not that great a story here.
I know what you mean.
I just think there's something that Tarkovsky does. I mean, he sort of hypnotizes you into kind of somehow feeling the film. Rather, I mean, obviously you can probably tell I quite admire him, really. You sort of feel your way through it. You don't just watch it. You kind of you don't sit there and kind of go, oh yeah, he's going to do that. You know, it's like you just kind of leave the cinema going, oh right, okay, now I feel this and I feel that, and you feel all these emotions from having watched this film. And visually, I mean, they are stunningly beautiful. All of his films are just visually like I've never seen anybody shoot films that beautifully. Yeah. So that's Solaris by
great acting as well. Yeah, wonderful film. Yeah. Original. So my number 5, staying quite mainstream, but I'm giving away my hand here. The fact that actually, unlike you, I think the original was better than the sequel. It's Terminator from 1994.
Oh right, yeah.
I love this film. I think the reason it's slightly better than the follow-up is I think because of the script. I think it's a tighter script sort of film. It sort of gets from A to B very effectively. It has obviously interesting, ambitious ideas, and it has a nice sort of pace into it. I think the second film overextends itself a little bit. I think it is a little baggy in the plotting, whereas this, I think the script is really perfect. It, of course, made Arnie both cool and bankable. He is smartly self-aware, and the script obviously allows him some smart lines and reactions. And I think actually people underestimate it's a pretty damn good performance from him physically. The little touches, like the way he sort of moves his neck, the way he sort of stares. You know, it's quite a good.
He's still doing it though, isn't he? Every other film.
Oh, he is.
Still doing the same performance.
This was good casting, but he's got charisma. That's the point of it. But
yeah.
It was the perfect role for him. Very simple premise, but it works nicely as a sort of a tense slasher film, almost a slasher version of.
And it's
Sci-Fi.
that thing of somebody from the future affecting what's happening now that will change the future.
Yeah.
So that they're able to, well, not quite, but you know, not quite, but it's got that thing, isn't it? The future, this time travel thing.
I think it's one of those ideas that you can play around with and change to work for your film. That's why it's such a successful sort of story to tell. Again, I think James Cameron was very good at, you know, really giving you strong female like heroines. So Linda Hamilton is just knockout in this role. She was, you know, virtually unknown at the time. That's a great character. As I said, the Terminator stalking through the city and at one point stalking through that police station. Your jaw is just on the floor. It's a mind-blowing piece of direction.
At the nightclub bit, I remember.
Yeah, I love that. The music and the whole way that's shot. Yeah. But as I said, very tight. I think one of the things that's its biggest credit is how well the relationship works between Hamilton and the Michael Biehn character without it feeling shoehorned in. Obviously later there's a reveal that it sort of makes sense, and that's very well handled. But they give it just enough. They build up their relationship over the course of the film, and it doesn't feel like this sort of needless sort of romantic plot that just happens to be in a sci-fi action film. It actually makes sense. You actually care about their characters, and they don't overdo it. It's a really well-written film. A lot of tension, a lot of good effects for the time. The score is really fantastic. Great concept. And I think if I had one small complaint, maybe the future scenes don't work as well. They feel a bit sort of tacked on. Maybe some of the visual moments in those scenes aren't quite as good.
I suspect that was budget, don't you?
Yeah. It's pretty low budget. I can't remember the budget, but it's pretty low budget for the time. But
I mean, I think they did a lot with the budget they had. I mean, I don't know what the budget was, but
that's always impressive. Great concept, small budget. Should be a lesson to modern day Hollywood. follow suit. Terminator. So you're number 4.
My number 4 is Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb by Stanley Kubrick from 1964. So this is Peter Sellers playing 3 roles, George C. Scott, Sterling Hayden. Got the old Sterling Hayden story.
Okay.
I was on Facebook today and put something about Sterling Hayden, and his son got back in touch and wrote me. Sterling Hayden's son actually got in touch with me, and had a little exchange. I'm still glowing a bit.
Yeah.
So is this sci-fi? I mean, I would say it is. You know.
Okay.
I mean, in some ways I would say it's sci-fi. In some ways I'd say it's not. It's a bit categoryless, isn't it? I didn't put it in my comedy thing, but it's definitely a comedy, and it's one of my favourite comedies. But I didn't put it in my list of comedies when we did that list because I kind of thought it's too good to be a comedy almost. It works on too many other levels to be considered a comedy, but it is incredibly funny. And Peter Sellers does give one of the funniest performances, or 3 performances, but particularly, I think, the president, Merkin Muffley, and as Dr. Strangelove himself, and Mandrake, the British officer. And he was going to play the pilot as well, Major Kong, but he faked an accident or something so that he didn't have to, and they got Slim Pickens to play the part because he wanted him to be a Texan, and Kubrick said, well, if I can't get Peter Sellers, I'll get the real thing, and they got this guy, and apparently he turned up with a saddle over his shoulder on the first effort. You know, he really is like the character you see in the film. So the premise of the film is simple. Well, a general, Jack D. Ripper, played by Sterling Hayden, goes mad and sends bombers to Russia to bomb Russia. So the president gets in touch with the Russian president and says, this is going to happen to your country, we have to stop it. And the Russian president tells them that they've now created a doomsday device. If anybody drops a nuclear bomb on Russia, it will set off all these nuclear bombs that will destroy the world. And nobody can stop it. And it was meant to be the ultimate deterrent, so they didn't have to kind of get engaged in the arms race. And so the rest of the film is, how do we stop these planes when this guy has done everything he can to stop us getting in touch with them or anything? And it's very tense. I mean, it's very tense. I think Kubrick just kind of this stroke of genius, really, because he kind of went. The Cold War is based on madness. I mean, there's mutually assured destruction, mad. You know, is literal. I mean, it is insane that this is the way that we stop ourselves killing each other. And he kind of went, you know, if it's that insane, the only thing we can do is laugh at it. And, you know, because there was another film called Red Alert, was there? Failsafe, was it? I can't remember. I think Failsafe was the book that Dr. Strange did. There was another film called Red Alert, which Sidney Lumet did, about the same time, about the same sort of thing. But it was all very earnest and serious. Henry Fonda, I think, was in it. And you know, and Dr. Strange was kind of irreverent and funny, and very funny, and he just had the opening scene where the 2 planes are refueling, which is, you know, almost like pornography. I mean, it's you know, he puts it to a love song, and it just looks obscene suddenly, and it's just ridiculous. And then the guy, Major Batguano or something, they've all got these strange names. He's always going about the preverts. So you know, it's just brilliantly weird, and you know, and I think I read somewhere that his character was pathologically heterosexual or something, which I thought was brilliant. Anyway.
Okay. So well, I love when this happens because I've got a Stanley Kubrick film at my number 4. It's A Clockwork Orange, 1971, classic dystopian sci-fi from an Anthony Burgess novel, puts a subversive and wicked satirical twist on it, a daring and bold vision of the future, a perfect sort of critique of institutions and class. There's distinct use of music, colour and sound. Sort of invents a new language which has, you know, stood the test of time, created one of cinema's most iconic anti-heroes and fashion senses as well. Malcolm McDowell is just note perfect as Alex, slimy, creepy, smart, charismatic and pathetic all in one. The narrative is effective, or the narration, sorry, one of the best films when it comes to shocking viewers into thinking. through perverse ways, really. Doesn't offer up easy answers. The closing credit sequence is one of the best in history. Will leave you skipping along the streets just singing in the rain, but then question yourself for doing it. I think that, along with the way they used In Dreams in Blue Velvet, is probably my favourite example of using that kind of, you know, beautiful, upbeat sort of pop song, but twisting it into something a lot more seedy and uncomfortable. So that's The Clockwork Orange, and we're into the top three of our sci-fi. So you're number 3, Ray.
My number 3 is Metropolis, Fritz Lang's 1927 masterpiece. Alfred Abel, Bridget Helm, Rudolf Klein-Rouge, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. So this is just an amazing achievement, really. Just a beautiful, beautiful film that has been so badly mutilated over the years. And finally, you can almost see the whole film. So I've got all these things. It was originally 153 minutes, and then in 1927 it was cut to various lengths. By 1931 it was 91 minutes, so almost half of it had gone. And that was the version that was around for years, and that's probably the version I first saw. And it was pretty rough. It didn't really make any sense whatsoever, but it was beautiful. Especially the robot, Maria, the robot, is quite famous. And this inspired C-3PO.
Definitely.
And some of the buildings actually were inspired, some of the look of Blade Runner as well. There's a definite, absolutely, that sort of, and it was all this kind of 1920s kind of, you know, what's the, you know, Art Deco kind of style to the whole thing. But anyway, so 91 minutes. Then in the 80s, something even worse happened to it, and Giorgio Moroder got hold of it, and he cut it to his own music, colorized it, put Bonnie Tyler and Queen on the soundtrack. Re-edited bits.
I've got to see.
Took it. No, you really haven't. It's just, it's horrible.
I'm going to see it.
He took out the title cards,
It's
put
the
subtitles
best thing
in,
ever, Ray.
and he reduced it to 83 minutes. This masterpiece. And for ages, that was the only version you could buy, and I had that on VHS, much to my shame.
Right.
But then they actually did make it as near to complete as they could.
Yeah.
And this was, I think, 2001. They did that. But there was still quite a bit missing. And then in 2008, in Buenos Aires, they found an original. It was a reduction negative, it was 16mm. It wasn't the original of the entire film. And so suddenly they had the whole film, and there was a couple of scenes that were so badly damaged they couldn't restore them. But pretty much they've now got it to 148 minutes, so it's missing about 5 minutes. And there's title cards telling you what happens in those 2 bits. But suddenly the story makes sense, and it's completely beautiful, and it just is a masterpiece. And it's one of the most influential science fiction films ever made, it's just fantastic.
Absolutely. There you go. So my number 3 is Alien. So this is Ridley Scott's true masterpiece, in my opinion.
Wow.
It's much better than Blade Runner.
Wow.
Perfection through and through. Even the tagline is perfect. In space, no one can hear you scream. One of the best taglines ever. It's all about the psychology and the claustrophobic atmosphere. It's just so tense. The jump scenes are perfectly staged. They really make them count. Nice build up to each one. There's a somber cast, a bit like I was saying with obviously The Thing, Veronica Cartwright, the late Harry Dean Stanton, the late John Hurt, Ian Holm, and introducing Sigourney Weaver, a breakthrough role. And I think what I really like about what the film does with her is the fact that she's not really set up as the main character. She's sort of set up as just another crew member. And they really handle that nicely throughout the film. It becomes a nice little surprise, the fact that she's actually the protagonist and the one you're really invested in. But all the characters are pretty distinct and well written. And Ellen Ripley is just a character ahead of her time, I think, when it comes to female protagonist in sci-fi cinema. It's a really feminist film, not least when you think of the central metaphor of anxiety over giving birth. You know, that's the way a lot of people read Alien. Really great music, again, from Jerry Goldsmith. He was a busy boy that year. He also knocked it out of the park with the Star Trek, the motion picture soundtrack. Music, really great music, and again it has a sort of feel where it's almost like a slasher film but set in space with an alien. brilliant creature design. The design of the sets and the overall look of the film is just stunning. It holds
It
up
is,
40
yeah.
years.
It genuinely
A
looks
true
alien, doesn't it?
original. And one of cinema's greatest cats. Jonesy.
Jones.
Jones,
Jonesy.
that's
Is it?
it.
I don't know.
Brilliant. Yeah,
Jones the cat.
great cat.
But yeah, I mean, it's H.R. Giger, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Did the just looks alien.
Just
doesn't
so beautiful.
Yeah,
design.
it does look otherworldly.
That is Alien. So you're number 2.
My number 2, well, it's a Ridley Scott film, and it's not Alien, it's Blade
not.
Runner from 1982. Harrison Ford, Rutger Hauer, Xian Young, Daryl Hannah, and Edward James Olmos.
Okay.
And this is obviously Ridley Scott's actual masterpiece. I don't know, it's just a bunch of kind of replicants come to Earth. Replicants are kind of created humans.
Yeah.
And Harrison Ford, Rick Deckard has to go and hunt them down one by one. And, it does, it just handles it so, it's very poetic, I think, and it's just, and because visually it's absolutely stunning, and it was this massively influential. It's influenced science fiction,
Yeah.
enormously. I mean, the look of science fiction. Before, I think before Star Wars, science fiction, when it was like Forbidden Planet and that sort of thing, science fiction looked like that.
Yeah.
And then, Star Wars kind of changed it a bit, so it got a bit dirtier, and a bit more real, I guess. But then this came along, and it was like kind of, he made the future look old. I think that's the thing that I really sort of keep going back to. It's like, when you look at it, it's not new anymore. It's already old.
Yeah.
All this stuff that we don't have yet is already old in this world. And it's dirty and it's not looked after. It's not, in the same way that we don't really look after our flat screen TVs, that our parents would be mortified. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and I think I
didn't
love
expect a flat screen TV to appear in your.
Well, you know what I mean. I don't mean.
I sort of know what you mean.
I think flat screen TVs are quite old fashioned now. Our big HD. But yeah. I mean, visually it was stunning. Emotionally, I was 13 when I saw it, and when it came out, and that was obviously the original version. There have been 2 more since then. But just the perfect age as well. I just found it emotionally incredibly powerful, and just fantastic performances. And Rutger Hauer was kind of made him a star, really, didn't it? And he was pretty amazing in it, and Daryl Hannah as well made her a star. And she was pretty amazing in it. And we did have a whole show on it, really. So I can't.
We did, yeah.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing.
Your number 2.
Far better than Alien. I mean, Alien's great, but far better than Alien. What's your number 2?
My number 2,
Probably not as good as Blade Runner.
Going back to the trilogy, I've already done Blade Runner. I think over time I might actually like the Blade Runner sequel a bit more, but when I've seen it, but it's not going to appear. I've only seen it once. So back to the trilogies. The Back to the Future trilogy is my number 2. So 1985, 1989, 1990. So we agree on the first film. I'm going to set you right on the sequels. I'm going to tell you why they work, why they're fun.
I'm going to not say a thing.
So the opening 20 minutes of part 2, I'll concede that. That's the weakest 20 minutes of the whole 3 films, if you like. It does get a bit bogged down. It gets a bit too confusing. But once it gets out of that part of the film, it really hits its stride. It hits its groove. It's an impressive, darker sequel. It gives us a very different sort of vision of the past and the future. The use of technology, this sort of 3D as spectacle. So that's really different. You get Biff Tannen as like a Trump-like egomaniac. Obviously, the writer has said he was inspired by Trump as well. He's truly scary. I think he's a great villain in that film. And you get these genius little touches like the sports memorabilia book or the sports result book, and that becomes a great sort of hook for the film. And again, there's edge of your seat, drama, stunts. I really love the hoverboard scene where he's like hovering along behind the car trying to get the book, and it's this really back and forth, really intense stuff. And I love the scene in the principal office when he's like hiding behind the desk trying to get the book. And again, free changes things up again. You have the beautiful pastiche of the Wild West and the conventions of westerns. You have the fact that they have to change the speed for the time jump to be possible. So these subtle little things that are sort of fresh. Doc's romance with Mary Stumberg's character is wonderful. I love that. It's sort of a great growth for Doc, the fact that he has that. And then you have the smart gags. You have Marty going by the name Clint Eastwood in the Wild West. You have the moonwalk dance, him dodging bullets. That's an absolute brilliant scene. The finale is, again, impressive. It pays off emotionally. And I think that's my argument, is the fact that they take what you love about the first film. They still do those moments, because I think a good sequel has to do that. But they change them up a bit. So, for example, they change, or I hate being called yellow to I hate the name Mad Dog in part 3, for example. I like those subtle little changes. One of the greatest trilogies in history, a true feat of cinema. Back to the Future trilogy.
Well, you convinced me.
Go.
So my number one, well, obviously it's 2001, A Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick from 1968. So Keir Dullea, Gary Lockwood, Douglas Rain. Just a masterpiece. I mean, absolute masterpiece of cinema. I mean, I actually think it kind of, it almost transcends cinema. Really, it's like it's not just a film. It's almost like a sort of a philosophical treatise, I think. Do you know what I mean? I know you don't like it. Do you?
I don't know. It's boring.
I just think I think it was absolutely. I saw it. The first time I saw it was about 9, I think, and they re-released it after, and I had no idea what was. So yeah, I'd just seen Star Wars. I was expecting something like that, and I had no idea what was going on, and I didn't really like it.
Okay.
But it kind of stayed with me, in a way, and over the years I kept thinking, I want to see that again. I want to see that again. I want to see that.
Yeah.
And then it was on TV, and I saw it on a black and white 14-inch TV one, and it blew my mind. I mean, I was about 13, I think, and it just blew my mind. And just absolutely amazing. I mean, and it's really like about the fundamental questions, like, why are we here? It's and where are we going, and what is the? I mean, it dealt very seriously with the idea of that aliens could have actually been involved in our evolution, that they could have, actually, I mean, not literally fathered the human race, but kind of, in an evolutionary sense, kind of fathered the human race, and then it's actually about them sort of kind of taking us to the next step of evolution. So it really, it spans the whole of humanity, and beyond. I mean, it's just such an epic kind of expansive thing, and it's kind of, it's difficult. It's like an art movie made on a huge budget, and you have to work at it, but you want to work at it. You want to kind of go, what was all that about? What was that ending about? But you kind of go in, it's all perfectly feasible to work it out. I just think it's an absolute masterpiece, and I'm not going to bother summarising the plot, because you should have seen it already. And if you haven't,
you've got to see it.
wrong.
No matter.
And see it on a big screen if you can.
So I'm probably in a similar place to a similar feeling film with my number one, and it's a film you've already had. It's Stalker from 1979.
Wow, really? It's your number one?
My number one. Yeah, for a couple of reasons. I mean, it's from a novel, a 1972 novel, Roadside Picnic it's called. Tells the story of an expedition led by a figure known as the Stalker. And I mean, I won't go into too much, but I think, just getting into why I loved it so much, I think the film reinvents the language of cinema, similar to what you were talking about. It's this grueling sort of mind warp of a movie which challenged me on so many levels, really challenged my senses, my mind, my psychology. I know I keep hitting the mic. And yet, it has this coldness, it has this distance, and yet I was immersed in the film all the way through. It just kept my attention. Each scene is beautifully layered and poetic, designed. It has this ambitious, like, non-linear structure. It's as if each section of the film is like being guided through a surreal sort of video game, like they are almost levels. Very cerebral, heavy with the philosophy, and yet it just works. It's not pretentious. It's kind of genius. The use of colour to represent different moods and parts of the movie is absolutely stunning. It really appeals to the senses, very well crafted, like a cryptid puzzle. Very unique, one of my most vivid cinema trips ever. That's Stalker, my number one. We are just about out of time. Thank you very much for doing
I
this,
love
Ray.
Stalker too.
It's been a fun.
It has.
Next week, thanks for doing it. Great stuff. We'll switch from the big screen to the small and television on focus.
That's a bad move.
Thanks for listening. Get lost. Have a good night. Bye.